All right, we're doing episode 66, and this time we have all three. We only had the 2 losers last time. This time we have the winner as well. So thankful.
3 losers.
That far. Yeah, that's
Three Bros Pod, where we read articles and opinions by other people and act like we know what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
because we definitely do.
So you got Cy, and we have a celebrity here. His name is Mr. Dithus. It's pretty crazy.
Mr. Dithus is with us.
Yeah,
Always
I've
love the Mr. Dithuses.
got about 3,000 followers on Instagram. By all intents and purposes,
I think you're missing
Jack just
another
ruined it.
0 or 2.
Mr. Dithus just ruined it by not being bothered by it anymore. Anyway, let's move on.
Right, he did ruin
Let's
it.
move on.
Chat is also acceptable, but sure, carry on.
All right, 3 different things to talk about. The first article, and let me see if I can share it here.
Let's see which
First
one he's going
article.
for first.
Yeah, I'm curious which one.
Yeah, we're doing the Patreon one first, guys.
Okay,
fair enough.
Oh, did I not
Not
make
the
that
one
clear?
that's
My
gonna-
bad.
No, it's okay. But you didn't pick the one that's going to light the world on fire. I think
Oh,
first, which is good.
oh,
good.
you mean with like agreement or disagreement?
Yeah, yep. Exactly.
Oh, no. Okay, well, now I'm scared about that. But all right.
Patreon.
So basically, by the way, article on heavy.com about Patreon explains why they deplatformed Sargon of Akkad. So it's about that whole deplatforming of Sargon from Patreon. And by the way, I've never seen heavy.com.
This one
I
looks like written by Kate Pringle.
Kate Pringle.
Yep.
I actually don't know how reputable the site is, but we're running with it now.
Well, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
at the very least, you know for a fact that Patreon has been going through some turbulence here with deplatforming some people. So I'm sure
Yeah.
it's reputable.
And this is kind of in the same veins of things that we've talked about before. It's kind of centered around another free speech discussion, right? It's I don't even know. Well, yeah, free speech discussion. Just more like, why the heck did they deplatform them, right? Like,
or should he be deplatformed?
We've talked about this before. I can't remember what it was in the other capacity, but we've talked about stuff like this before. And I think I've said also, and once I say this, I'm sure you guys will have something to say. Patreon is a private company, right? Right? They can't just kick off who they want.
Yes.
Now we can say, hey, this platform is so vital and monopolistic and important that it's basically like public space, but I don't think Patreon is, right? Like that's not a good argument for Patreon. So I really don't know. Does anybody have any issues with this? I really don't. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I did see really quickly, Sam Harris deleted his account because of this. I don't know if you guys saw that.
No.
And I feel like this is the response people should have if they don't like this, right? It's a market. Take your business elsewhere. Not difficult. And even in the article, Peterson and Rubin, there's that video. I don't know if you guys watched it when you went through it, but they talk about how, hey, we're not happy with this and we're going to start our own website. Okay, good.
Well,
There
I
you
think
go.
I think what I enjoy about this is that it's a nice example of the quote unquote perfect world for me, right? If, like you said, if you're unhappy with a product, there's somebody else ready to step in that product's place and say, we will offer you that same service separately. I think
And it gets easier to do that.
It certainly does. But I think where we have the issue is not with Patreon. It's not with this situation. It's with larger things. Like, it's very hard to do the same thing to a YouTube or to a Twitch or to Google, right? If Google decides to deplatform you, or if Twitter decides to deplatform you, so many people use that service that it feels like it's much harder, right? You have to go a little farther to be able to get around that. Whereas with a Patreon, it's a much easier solution to say, I'm just going to build a new type of Patreon. And I think that's the only place I would say where people get really bent out of shape.
You say that,
kind of-
but
go ahead,
to be
Jeff.
fair, there's been sort of a adpocalypse, quote unquote, on YouTube, especially as far as the conservative talking figures on there are concerned. They're being targeted on YouTube. So Sargon of Akkad is somebody that absolutely would have been pretty much entirely demonetized on YouTube. So Patreon's going to be like a main source of revenue for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure it's so easy to switch to other reputable types of websites here. I mean, it might be, but Obviously,
guess-
this hits them where it hurts. It definitely does.
Absolutely, and I think the feeling for a lot of conservative groups is that it's this domino effect of, well, I can't use Twitter, I can't use YouTube, now I can't use Patreon. Like
Right.
I'm not going to be able to make a living, and you're effectively, in their viewpoint, you're stifling that opinion. The difference here, I think, Chad, is that you have maybe, in my opinion, two somewhat reputable people that are saying we're going to step in and try to resolve this by creating a similar type of platform to Patreon, which
Right.
what I'm trying to say is that doing that with a Patreon is easier than doing that with a YouTube or a Twitter, or you know what I mean?
It definitely is. It definitely is.
That would be my argument, kind of to how this impacts the greater picture of how people.
Look, there's always going to be people too that try to take it in this day and age at least that try to take advantage of a situation, and just like bang their chest and get attention by complaining about something. So you got to weed through those people. And then there's some people that just say, hey, like, this isn't fair and we're going to start our own. All right, good for you. Good for you. So I did try to find.
There's a
I
few
wanna
other
read- I wanna
alternatives here.
If I can really quickly, Chad, I apologize. If I can
No, go
read the quote from Sargon that got him kicked.
Oh, Lord.
I'm not going to read the parts that are difficult. I'll just explain them in context. Before I read it, though, I did try to find all the context I could. It's a very long interview that this quote is taken from.
Yeah, it's like an hour and some
So the
change.
first thing that strikes me is when I looked up, you looked it up too, Chad? Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing I did when I looked up the interview, actually, is, wow, people really look for things. They really fish for things. Because even in this day and age, if you got something buried, the account that it was on was not very subscribed to. It wasn't very watched, It was just like, wow, people can find anything. They will comb through, especially if people don't like you, right? Like, they will comb through anything. But I don't know. From the comments, I think it's not that good. It's not good at all, actually. I think it's pretty important how you say things, and I think that this was a failure on that. But let me go ahead and read them. So basically, this is what got Sargon kicked. I just can't be bothered with people who choose to treat me like this. It's really annoying. Like, you're acting like a bunch of N-word. Just so you know, you act like white N-words. Exactly how you describe black people acting is the impression I get dealing with the alt-right. I'm just not in the mood to deal with this kind of disrespect. Look, you carry on, but don't expect me to have a debate with one of your F words. Like, why would I bother? Maybe you're just acting like a N-word, mate. Have you considered that? Do you think white people act like this? White people are meant to be polite and respectful to one another, and you guys can't even act like white people. It's really amazing to me. Okay. So I'll just try to break down.
Dissect.
There is. And I'm going to just say a couple things first, and then you guys can take it if you want. The ending, I honestly, I don't know how to take the first part of it. He shouldn't have used the N-word. Jeez, of course we can all agree on that. But there's something about the first part of this. He's literally complaining about the alt-right, which is interesting to me. Like, especially from Sargon of Akkad. I'm just like, what's going on here? Factions? Like, what's going on?
Well, because he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, he's not entirely aligned with. He's just sort of a
I agree.
voice that is pushed back to the left, but he's not necessarily aligned with the
I agree.
alt-right.
And by the way, we're all individuals. I don't like this collective groupthink whole thing. Like, I actually appreciate when people can separate themselves and critically think. We all can here. That's why we do this podcast, right? So there's a lot better he could have done with a lot of that statement, right? But like, it's not as bad, I feel like, as people think. But those last few lines about white people, ouch. Go ahead. Does anybody have anything to say?
Well, I think to your point, right? What I find in some degree ironic is you're pushing back against the alt-right, who is somewhat aligned with, white nationalists, KKK types, and you're literally saying you guys act inappropriately, and then you're saying in the same phrase, you should be acting like white people. Like, that's just, to me, so inverse to what you're saying initially that it's, I don't know. I guess I just don't understand it.
Yeah, me neither. And I love that you brought that point up, because it nail on the head right there, especially when we consider the article and what happened to him as far as Patreon goes. Is this is this like Patreon bannable? I don't know. I just those last two lines, man. I don't know what was going on there. What was he thinking? Like, especially like Caleb said, after he just said, like, you're not as good as what I consider to be trash. You're just as trash. But oh hey, but because you look a certain way, never mind. You actually, it's crazy, man.
I think overall,
yeah.
the fact that you've got other people that are stepping up and saying, we'll build a new Patreon type thing, almost makes it a non-issue, right? Because at the end of the day, like you said, a private company can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I just found his most recent video. Well, not his most recent, but he essentially addresses this, and in his comments section, he says here he's part of Subscribestar, which is an alternative form of Patreon. So there you go.
Who, Sargon?
Sargon, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'd like to leave it on, and I think all of us agree on this because we've done a topic like this many a time. I really don't care if people, as long as they're not literally hurting people, I really don't care if there's hateful people that only use words that want to have their own space. Go be in that space. Good. Separate yourself. Go away. Go be in your space. Like, slinging these words is not necessarily appropriate. It's definitely not appropriate. And you should not at that point necessarily even be allowed to be a big figure or like a leader or someone to look up to. And you won't anyways, because people are going to see this and not like it. But at the end of the day, if you want to use these words nonetheless, then go create your own sphere of influence that is away from us, and that's just fine. Go do you, and you go stay in your corner until you go away. That's just how I feel about it. So words are not necessarily words aren't literal violence. So if you want to say things, then say things. Go for it. You're just gonna get ostracized. So
hopefully.
At this point in time, I've moved past hopefully. I have enough faith. It will happen. So
fair enough. Let's move on.
Yeah. We get criminal justice reform. We get criminal justice reform in a government that is all Republican. Just go ahead and I was surprised by that. Maybe you guys weren't, but
I'm not. Okay. You know how much money we spend on incarceration? You know how many people we have incarcerated in this country?
Then why didn't it happen before? Then why didn't it happen before?
Well, because it's peaked like in the last 5-10 years, probably. It's like insane numbers now.
So in the Obama years,
more people
we increased our jail population? I don't believe that.
We have more people incarcerated in this country than China does. And that's not per capita.
That is correct.
Digest that fact. That
is correct.
Insane.
No, yeah, that is correct. Anyways, all right, let's give a little context here. We're just gonna
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Found this NBC article. And actually it's been all over the news because it happened, obviously.
One of the few things that has passed bipartisan.
Yeah. In a bipartisan act, Senate passes criminal justice reform bill with overwhelming support. This is obviously great. And especially when government doesn't do crap these days, you always got to give it credit for doing something, for passing something. But I really want to focus on one thing, if you guys don't mind. And if you guys have comments on the article, that's fine. But I really wanted to focus on one thing myself. Why does Trump care? Trump, as we know, and I'm not willing to take pushback on this, Trump cares about Trump. Trump will do anything that makes Trump look better, make more money, all those things, right? Anything that Trump can do to sniff his own farts, he will do it. So why does he care about this? Is it political? Does he think this is going to get him some like political victories? Is it Jared Kushner? I've seen that. And I almost believe that. Even Ivanka, because Ivanka helped Kim Kardashian get a nonviolent drug offender pardoned earlier this year. I don't know if you guys knew that happened.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I have no idea. We even saw just today, Trump said he wouldn't shut the government down over the wall, and then he just did. So in the world of Trump, why does he care? Why did he sign this bill? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, just to clarify,
Sure.
The government isn't shut down yet. Isn't that vote tomorrow?
He said he wasn't going to sign the bill that was going to be passed to avoid it. What everybody thought was agreed on, Trump threw a grenade by saying, "Nope, I don't agree on it anymore."
Well, because he's had some huge pushback from his base. But okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but
I was not aware of that.
The House did come back tonight, really quickly on this off topic, but that's fine. The House did come back tonight and vote for their own bill. The House did. That also includes the $5 billion that he was looking for to avoid the shutdown in the first place. He wanted $5 billion for the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats and House Republicans basically told him that there's no votes for that. We're not spending that money because Republicans have a weird alliance right now because of the money being spent. Some of them, at least, not all of them. But then once Trump said, "I'm not signing the continuing resolution," which basically gave him nothing for his wall, he's like, "Nope, I'm going to shut the government down." The House came back together, said, "Okay, we'll give you your $5 billion. The only question is, will the Senate do it? Probably not." So yeah, the government will shut down tomorrow. It should.
Okay. Interesting.
Because the Senate won't give, but the Senate is Republican. So, all right. Anyways,
interesting.
Anywho,
sorry. Yeah.
Why does Trump care about a criminal justice reform bill? Anybody have any thoughts? Anybody? I mean, if it's political
capital.
That's okay. If it's political, that's fine. We can see that common sense argument right there. But does it win any voters? Is any disadvantaged and especially colored voter going to vote for him over a Dem in 2020, no matter what he does? No. I don't think so. Right? So if it's political, then what? It's just weird. It's just weird.
I don't know. So he came out explicitly in support of this bill then? I assumed he tweeted about it.
Yeah, he signed it.
Well, of course he signed it.
Yeah,
sure.
They passed it. So he signed it.
But you're saying like he's been bragging that it's been passed as if that's part of his legacy?
Yes, he was on Twitter and bragging. Correct.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Of course, that's what he does. Would he not brag?
He's just taking political capital where he can take it then. I mean, this is a Congress that has not done much in the past 2 years. The hands are going to change soon here in a couple weeks. So anything to add to your list of the do-nothing stuff that you've already been doing for 2 years, I mean...
Yeah, I hear that. I don't know that anybody.
Do you have any ideas? What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, perception is reality. So if their perception is we do this, maybe we can pull those voters that I don't think they will. Then okay, that's a really steep give.
I think he's just proud that they passed something.
How about this? Do you think that there's any backlash in any of the populace to a bill like this?
I can't imagine why there would be.
I don't think that's correct. I think there definitely is. I think if you told some people in our society today, we are going to let some criminals go because they were nonviolent and they were just drug offenses, there'd be people who have an issue with that. Because that's what it is. And if you told them that's exactly what it is, they'd have an issue with that. They'd say, well, were they selling drugs or doing drugs and keep them in jail?
Well, the fact that you do that accent implies that you're thinking of a specific group of people.
Old people, correct.
Oh, sure.
That's my old accent. Is there an old accent?
It's got a bit of a southern
Am I trying to cover for something else?
To it.
Oh, sure.
A little bit of a southern draw to it.
Well, honestly, I didn't mean to do that. I was just doing a comical accent. But look,
sure.
Seriously, I do think, tell me if I'm wrong. You don't think there's people like that? Come on. I think
definitely are. I think the majority of the people in this country, though, realize that we have an incarceration problem in this country. Most people, I think, realize that the war on drugs has obviously failed, and we're spending a lot of money on non-violent drug offenders. I would say so. I
hope so. I wonder if there's polling on this. I haven't seen it.
There must be, because just by virtue of this being bipartisan, there must be Republicans that are aware of their constituents, and
definitely
they're not trying to step on too many toes here. So the fact that it passed with 87 yay and 12 nay is
that's huge. Right.
That's big, man.
So yeah, I agree with you on that. And also,
I'm just glad to see it. To be honest,
I didn't want to make out that
long overdue.
I didn't want to make out that hateful group to be like a huge populace. It's not, but there's definitely still people out there that, What? They were smoking the joint at the corner? Give them 20 years. Grandma. God damn, Grandma.
Relax.
That's
Man just got off work. Give him a break.
He trying to chill, yo. All right, anyways. All right, let's move on to this last thing.
Yeah,
Apparently that's where Caleb had some issues. Some issues.
Caleb hates workers. I think that's what it is.
Yo, come on. Don't do that right off the bat.
Hardworking Americans. I think he hates them.
What a scumbag.
Pretty brutal and
that's super brutal, yo.
Untrue.
Maybe not so factual, maybe.
I will start with so we're moving on to a third topic. There was a couple articles that I shared with you guys. Okay, one was corporate America gives out a record $1 trillion in stock buybacks. And then the other one was politicians have caused a pay collapse for the bottom 90% of workers, researchers say. I'm going to start with the CNN one. We really don't have to talk through all of them. Obviously, we'll all have our thoughts. But I want to start. I'll start right here. I only have one idea to talk about. And I wish I had the video because I'm going to claim something that I should have the video for, but I'm still going to claim it. When our government passed the tax cuts last year, there was a lot of criticism from certain people that said, this isn't going to help workers as you think it will. This is just going to give corporate America a lot of power to do stock buybacks, among other things too. And you know, there were some people arguing for the tax cut that said, whether they were right or wrong, or whether the tax cut was right or wrong, they were saying that's not true. They're not, it's going to go to R&D. It's going to go to the workers. It's going to go to R&D. It's going to go to workers, just like pushing back against that. And now here we go. A lot of these companies are public, so they have to publish their actual stuff. There's facts and there's data to this. Oh, in this day and age, oh my goodness. And these corporations are buying back a lot of their stock. And if we're going to look at the modern American corporation, as far as workers go, from the top down, most of the stock ownership is at the top. So if you use a lot of these tax cuts to inflate your stock price by buying it back, which is what it does, you enrich people at the top. For the most part, there is obviously regular people who are investing in the stock market. Do not get me wrong. Okay, that is very true. They have 401ks. But I would say absolutely the concentration of wealth when the stock market goes up gets concentrated to people who aren't poor, right? So I just, we heard a lot about how this tax cut was going to help workers. And we're seeing results. We were told deficits were going to go up too. I'm going to attach that to this too. I know I'm getting a little harsh here, but deficits are going up after the tax cuts was implemented. That's not what we were told by the administration. Okay, buybacks are happening at a record break. That's not what we're being told by the administration. So these are things that make me upset. I get really, really upset when I think about how we were sold these tax cuts because it's just not true.
It's almost like you can't trust the market to be entirely ethical in regards to the worker.
Of course. I don't even think anybody would disagree with that. You can't tell me that just creating a completely free market is just going to benefit workers. That's not true. That's just not true. So
there's a few things they list in this article.
Yeah.
Policymakers, for instance, have been reluctant to raise minimum wages, which would directly benefit workers at the bottom of the income distribution. They've taken steps to make it harder for workers to secure bargaining power, eroding union membership in the process. And Bivens and Searholtz, which I believe are the ones who did this study, maintain that the Federal Reserve has contributed to the problem by prioritizing low inflation over high employment. That last one I don't get, to be honest, but
I also read this in the article at some point.
That's what this think tank is saying.
It's no coincidence, said David Santishi, TrimTab's director of liquidity research. A lot of the buybacks are because of the tax law. Companies have more cash to pump up the stock price. Boom. It's right there.
It's interesting too, because it's like you can give this tax cut. Let's say specifically, I mean, obviously this article is concerning more things than just the tax cut in the past year, but that's the most recent example.
Yeah.
You could take the same tax cut given to corporations. And if you were to take that same amount of money and just hand that out, let's say to lower, middle, and upper class Americans in sort of a progressive type of whatever.
Sure.
I would wonder if that would be better objectively for the economy than this alone.
I don't think you could argue that. I mean, consumption goes up.
Like, skip
right? So
the
that's a positive.
corporations, give it straight to the workers. Do you think that objectively is better for America as a whole?
Wait, what exactly? Just so that I'm clear, what exactly are you giving?
So
the
take
worker?
this same,
Yeah, I don't-
take the same
So
tax cut, right?
Okay.
Take the same loss of revenue from the federal government that the hit that they took and gave to corporations essentially last year or 2 years, whatever, however long ago it was.
Mhm.
Don't give it to corporations. Give that same amount of money saved to lower and middle class Americans. Do you think that would be better off for our economy?
Yes. It depends. It depends on. I'll go first. When it starts with, how do I say this? What a lot of poorer people, Chad, already don't pay federal taxes, right? They already get like refunds, right? So, what are you cutting exactly? Do you want to continue to say, like, you could be the federal government and say, instead of giving the corporation tax breaks, even though you guys basically don't even pay taxes, you still do pay sales tax, which people do. If you own property, you own property tax. So do you want to like take that money and redistribute it that way? Because that'd be great. If we could write off all the sales tax we pay, if we could write off property tax, that would be wonderful. If we could write off state tax, that would be great.
I was just thinking income tax, just relieving the income tax paid by a majority of Americans, as opposed to giving that same tax break to corporations.
No, I think that'd be great because also,
because that's what the argument boils down to.
If you wanna take that tax cut, if you want to take the corporate rate, put it back to 35%, take that money that you now earn back because of the corporate rate, and say, from the bottom to the top, we're going to take all this money, and whoever pays federal taxes, we're going to move up, and have nobody pay until we reach that ceiling. I think that'd be great because you'd be cutting federal taxes, not necessarily for the poorest, but you'd also be cutting taxes for people who can spend that money, people who make 50 to 100,000, who do pay federal taxes. Now all of a sudden they don't. That'd be helpful. So yeah, I think more consumption is. Does anybody else have any? I mean, my common sense tells me more consumption is the economy.
I'm inclined to agree, but I also just don't know.
These things are complicated too. If you have a very populated area and space is limited, and all of a sudden everybody makes decent money, which sounds like the right thing to do. There's no question, but there's definitely repercussions from that, right? Like, how do you house everybody? The market of housing would just skyrocket because everyone has a little bit more money. So things can get complicated, depending on where you live. But
so I'm not really sure where this conversation went for you guys. I want to bring it back to this specific article a bit more, because this is a conversation we had 2-3 weeks ago about labor unions, about your bottom layer of employees, and how we can strengthen that portion of America, for lack of a better term, right? Mm-hmm. And as I read this specific article here, there's a few things that I point to, and I'm like, okay, these things I can agree with. Other things,
the buyback one?
No,
okay,
I'm over on the other one. The politicians have caused a pay collapse for the bottom 90% of workers. Okay. So the first thing I read is, second paragraph. While many economists pin much of the blame for wage stagnation on impersonal market forces such as free trade and technology change, you can't just. I feel like a little bit you're just kind of writing that off, which, let's be honest, changing technology has a huge impact to your average worker. I mean, let's look at manufacturing alone. We're in this weird stage, at least this is just my viewpoint, my opinion. We're in this weird stage where there's going to be, to some degree, less and less and less and less jobs as the decades continue on.
There's new jobs that sprout up. No.
I don't know that there's as many that sprout up that are lost.
not quite equivalent.
Right. And I
like
feel
when-
like that's going to continue to be exacerbated as we continue into new technologies.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
We're on the
This is
tipping
why-
point of
yeah.
this, right? So and my point here is we can't just ignore that as a future issue, right? I would much rather start looking at what's coming down the pipeline as opposed to complain about what happened since 1970 or 1980. I feel like
I agree with
in
that,
a
of
lot of
course.
papers, we're just writing this off as like technology's coming. But
I feel like
Right.
even though if you would compensate
But-
for
but
those
you-
lost jobs to automation, you're still seeing flat wages.
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I'm saying is that is there a possibility that because of automation, we're seeing flatter wages? Because it doesn't take.
But
You
wouldn't
know.
if you assume
ahead.
though that let's say
Mhm.
automation means you have to pay less overhead because less workers, wouldn't just the rest of the workers in general get more money as just like a
No, because
no.
if
Yeah,
no,
more
because
money
if I
with
have less workers,
And that's a
yeah,
problem.
Yeah,
more money with less workers though. So just by virtue, don't you think the rest of those remaining workers would get paid more just by
Well, here's the problem,
having that
though,
much more
right? In this, to your guys' point, in this natural competition, in this market, in this free market idea, right, that a lot of people talk about on the right or conservatives, is if I have more people that don't have a job, I can compete to see who's going to do it for the least amount of money, right? To your point. And that's something that if you come from that perspective, I do think needs to be talked about.
So unethical, dude.
I'm not saying it's ethical. I'm saying that's what, right? To your point, Cyril.
But yeah, no,
this is what the free market drives.
there is an argument there, and there's an argument that makes sense there. It's just that's not really that ethical, but sure.
I'm
yes,
not
there
saying it is, but I'm
I'm
actually proving your point and saying that this is what a free market will give you.
I'm with you.
So again, we can't just ignore that, and especially free trade,
No, we can't.
right? The fact that you're competing with other economies in which people can be paid peanuts to make iPhones doesn't help your country with employment and money,
Very
right?
unhelpful.
That's just a fact.
Yep.
Which is why I a lot of times people I've heard talk about like, well, at what point, when do we hit a tipping point where there should be a world minimum wage? That's another argument I've heard because the fact of the matter is at some point you are going to be competing with somebody potentially in China, in Russia, in Italy, in Africa, you name it, anywhere. And you're competing for a job with that person because as we move on, it's going to get to a point where you can ship anything anywhere in the world. You can have anything made or anything created anywhere within the world.
Can we get to a level of productivity where we can sufficiently provide basic needs to every human being, and then after that compete?
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to that.
How do we get there? How do we get there? Do we use governments?
Unfortunately, I think that we need to wait for technology. That's the key.
That's actually
until the technology is there to achieve that goal, Cyril, we have to deal with this problem. I think where we are.
Yeah, I think realistically that is the correct answer. I do. I think it still frustrates me that we can't just,
that takes technology though
right now.
World building.
No, I agree. I think realistically, technology is actually going to be the thing that really makes it so that society's equal. I hate that word, but makes it so that every single person at least has their sufficient basic needs, served, and then from there we can compete, which is I think everybody's dream. I think
to be able to have somewhere to live, clothes on your back, food in your belly, and water as well. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
As long as you're given the tools you need, right.
It requires a world government, though.
Potentially,
so
that's
where that conversation. Yeah.
Or it requires all governments to agree to a specific standard. Now, will that ever happen? Probably not. But
right,
technology helps all these things, though.
But that's something that if you look at it,
you can agree to anything.
Because everybody's a journalist now. You ever think of that? Everybody's a journalist.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. China's still committing horrible.
It doesn't matter as much now, but it will down the road. Probably after you're dead, sure.
Why journalism as right now is as connected as much as we need for that purpose, and still governments still commit to doing horrible things to their people. Right? You would need a world government. Like governments work because you exist within a society where there are consequences if you don't follow the rules. If you just have every government come together and say, well, we'll pledge to this, I mean, just much like the Paris Agreement, how's that going? Not so great.
Well, I guess that's my point, right? The Paris Agreement
is
the first stepping stones to getting towards those overall goals. And right now it's not working very well. You're right, Chad. But hold on, Chad. Let's look at 50 years from now when it's our generation that's the ones impacting this change, or even my kids' generation, or one day you'll have kids. Maybe it's your kids' generation that have the open-mindedness to be able to execute plans like this on a bigger level. I do think at some point that is likely to happen. But if I continue on all the way down towards the bottom, you have this economist with the University of Pennsylvania, who's obviously, has a lot of credentials about it. And what I find interesting is that she finds that the EPI author's emphasis on certain policy decisions is overstated. She points out that wage stagnation has happened in other wealthy countries that have pursued different economic policies. She also says that the policies to reduce essentially monopolies have a real role in playing in bringing up wages across the board.
Yes,
and this is where
also true.
This is where, in my opinion, this is more impactful than a union. This is more.
I don't even disagree with that. But how do we end? What's easier, to start making unions or to break up these huge, powerful companies? Go ahead.
But to me, when you look at when we did that to other powerful companies before, the fallout of those, in my opinion, right, and this is completely opinion-based, you guys can tell me if you disagree, but in my opinion, have had a larger and longer impact than bringing unions in this. So if I look at the 60s, 70s, and 80s with unions and their overall impact, as opposed to if I go back to the Teddy Roosevelt era of breaking antitrust, which do you think had a longer lasting and more positive impact between the two? I would say it's antitrust legislation. Significantly, by a large margin.
Well, okay, that's
just, again, my opinion.
I don't disagree with the generalization. Specifics, I don't know, but I don't disagree with the generalization. Like, I agree. I think both can do a lot. I think antitrust probably did more. I do.
To me,
that's why Teddy goes down really great. Go ahead.
Right. To me, they were she's writing here later on. Hence, right, if we pursue this aggressively, antitrust legislation, I'm reading this now word for word, could have the doubling effect of lowering consumer prices and boosting wages. The reason why is because if you have more players in the game, these players are forced to compete hard for that dollar. And one of the bigger ways to compete for that dollar, other than just lowering your prices, is to boost wages. And why would you want to boost wages? Because you're doing that to get the best people on your team. To me, that is the best way right now, until technology changes, to have a healthier competition in our economy, to be able to boost those wages and lower prices properly.
This is correct. I hope I remember to cut that. That was a great splice that I could cut in the future. But yeah, that's correct. And I do agree with you when you say that, but I do two things want to say. One, what's more practical? I just don't know if breaking up these huge companies is even practical. I hope it is. I really hope we're not past that point. But sometimes I read history and I look at the large companies back in the day, and I'm like, are we even worse now? Like, we've got some big companies, man.
Yeah, but
dominate sectors.
Yeah.
And then number two,
you're right.
Quickly, I'll let you respond. But number two. This is all, especially when it comes to antitrust, you need to have a neutral arbitrator, making sure that the competition is fair. Okay, who is that? Is that not the government? So I don't.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't. When you say, hey, antitrust laws do more, they do, but they also need to go hand in hand with an actual neutral arbitrator who can be neutral and say, this is unfair. But here's the thing. You need to have trust. We live in this world where nobody even trusts the government on a lot of things, actually. And I think it's a really high, scary level. So what? Now you're going to tell those people, oh, the government will make sure the markets are competitive?
The government doesn't have to make sure the markets are competitive, right? The government should be doing things. I work in the telecommunications industry. One of the things that I was flabbergasted by was the fact that the number one biggest telecommunication in my specific industry company, Comcast, wanted to buy the number two biggest telecommunications industry in Time Warner Cable. Why was that squashed? That was government.
Yeah, right.
They said, no, that's way too freaking big. No
Right.
way can you do that. That would be a flat out internet monopoly in America. We all know that would be terrible,
Mhm.
right? So in my industry specifically, where I feel like that is a perfect example of trying to do that. Now we need to continue to do that on a larger, on a better scales, right? I don't want to say larger, but better.
Right.
Yeah, we're not trying to
regulation.
we're not crazy. We're not trying to have every single different telecommunication company every town you go to. No, but yeah, we can do better.
Actually, I disagree. I think it does need to be different for every town you go to. And when I say different, I mean there needs to be more than one.
Yes.
Each consumer needs to have the option of more than one competitor, right? The biggest one I point to, and I don't understand.
I think I want more than that, but go ahead.
Well, sure, but if I get at least two, that's better than what I have right now.
That's better than one, no question. Go ahead.
Right?
Dial up.
The dial up.
Sorry. Get the fuck out of here. Go ahead, Gilb.
Shout out to Dial Up. We're sponsored
for telecommunications. That's why I think if you look at cell phones, that's the more closer to market freedom example that I have in the industry that I work in, right? Because it doesn't matter where you are. You can use Sprint, T-Mobile, Cricket, Verizon.
Yeah.
I can keep going. The list goes on.
You can pay out
have
the
a
ass
better
for Verizon,
competition
but have great coverage.
Right. Well, you have better competition there than you do in a lot of places.
To your credit too, Verizon used to have a stranglehold on the biggest thing that you want in a cell phone selling business. It's they had service everywhere, everybody else didn't. Now everybody has service pretty much everywhere. Like unless you live in a really weird, strange place, like you can get service. And back in the day, Verizon actually cost more than they do now with less data. Like even like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yep.
But then it got real competitive and it got real hot. And guess
they're still the most expensive, though. To be fair,
they are, but they are still the most reliable.
But they're also
they are still the most reliable. Yeah, that's true.
But basic level of service,
premium service.
I'm a millennial that doesn't use my data too much,
right?
Just enough that like I use data. I use probably like 2 or 3 a month.
Shout out to Straight Talk.
Right? Yeah, I have Straight Talk and I have no problems. I also live in a city, to be fair.
Right.
But, yeah, but you know.
That's I guess you guys, that's my point.
Live in a city too, because you guys live close enough.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Go ahead.
So are we saying that the answer is not more regulation, but smarter regulation?
Well, that's always the answer. What I'm saying is a more effective solution to what we were talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago, to me, is pointed out eloquently in this article. And actually, to some degree, in my opinion, kind of, I don't want to say like disproves anything, but it says here politicians have caused pay collapse for the 90. Politicians, yes, but not because that, in my opinion, not because they've eroded unions, because I think unions have a hand in doing that themselves.
Well, it's not just
because of. Well, you did right, but what I'm saying is that the biggest factor here, in my opinion, and if you want to make that type of change that Cyril is looking for sooner, before the technology comes for what we were talking about earlier, just like a universal basic necessities program, whatever that might look like, breaking up large companies like this does 2 things, and the 2 things that you want to do, it lowers the cost for goods because they're trying to be competitive, and it raises wages for workers because you need the best employees to be the most competitive.
Right. If you have to stay on top of your game, then you'll shell out more for. No, I agree.
But again, I think the disagreement here would be, I don't know if that's the biggest factor to wage stagnation. I could point you to several other first world countries that do a lot better job at sort of evening out the pain.
Right, but I could also
don't mind me
point
saying,
to several other. Hold on, real quick. I could also point to other first world countries that have the same problem and try to pursue it in different manners,
but not quite to the extent that we have that problem.
I would disagree with you.
You're wrong there, though.
Well, look at France. They have a huge problem right now. They have a huge similar problem to us.
They're protesting, yes, but their wages are they do better. Things are a bit more even there. All you have to do is look at the CEO. All you have to do is look at the CEO payment
numbers, man,
to worker ratio in the United States, and it's like 2 to 3 times more than the next country. Like it's
Canada does way better than us. It's crazy.
I agree that absolutely just monopolies A and B innovation are going to screw over workers and especially consumers. well, not innovation per se, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But we do a particularly bad job in this country with doing right by our workers. Even if the
Yes, we do.
industry factors are such that that's just the way we're going, that's fair. We still do a bad job in this country.
And there are
so
some
my
companies that do a good job. And by the way, there are some
Sure,
people,
yeah.
like even us, some of us in this chat that lead other people and do a good job of it, even in a shit situation. But that's still, I mean, we still have a shit sandwich that we can
I hear you. All right, but let me change the
Yeah.
context in which I'm speaking then.
Sure.
Specifically in my viewpoint, right? We live in America. We deal with American problems. We deal with an
Yes.
American mentality and American society. You're
Yes.
more likely to get more done by pursuing antitrust regulation, in my
I
opinion,
agree.
than
I
you
agree.
are more of a
And
socialist.
I agree
agenda.
with that.
Yeah,
But
we-
my
And I
only
think that is going to get you farther,
I
given
agree.
our society and culture.
The only thing is, if we strip away what's practical and where we've gone and how we can do better moving forward, I don't necessarily agree with that. But I think if we just look at it in a vacuum, yes, I agree. My last question for you guys, and we'll end it. This is really radical. And like I just alluded to just now, like it takes a lot of power to like actually be able to break up these big businesses. We've allowed them to run to a point where they can just get bailed out in 2008, 2009 for whatever the heck they were doing stupid. And they were just like, hey, fix our problems. Thanks. Okay. So, you know, there's a whole nother side of this, which is what's practical, what can make things better sooner, quicker, with less political power, you know? So my question to you is, Caleb, especially to Caleb, can you ever get serious antitrust done? Like serious antitrust, where you actually break up every single sector of this economy that needs it, huge companies, especially the big banks of the world, whittled down into all kinds of small. Go ahead.
I think you can. I think the issue again is the same issue that you have in our last conversation. That's technology. You know, if I speak to my industry specifically, there's only one fiber cable on the poles outside.
Right.
Until you can have either.
So does that mean only one utility can use it?
Right now,
Okay.
without technology being changed, without something new invention, without a new process, without something new, right? The only other option you have is running 3 or 4 of those lines, right? And the fact of the matter is it's too expensive. The cost is too high for a company to step in and say, okay, we're going to run fiber side by side to yours. It's too expensive right now. So until either the cost of fiber comes down, or somebody invents some magical new way to run several companies off of one line, you might not get what you need initially.
Right.
Now, that being said, I do think there are other industries that we can potentially look at and say, hey, this is something that we can tackle. This is something we can kind of go after and look at and see.
I would say especially in banking, and I work in that.
I don't know banking as well, so
what about you,
would
Chad?
know better.
You think antitrust could get legitimately done somehow? Is it practical?
Legitimately done? Let millennials
I'm talking
grow
about
up a little bit.
Seriously,
I
actually,
seriously.
that's right. Yeah, we need some good leadership. Good leadership.
Good leadership, and we need people who vote, because millennials are they're more invested, I would say, in those types of things.
Yeah,
As far as I can tell.
I think
Can I
also
ask you right there?
we all respect
what
we
that
just all
means?
respect good opinions. Like I always say, we got a left, right, and center on here. You just had the left and right agree on antitrust because it just makes sense. It does.
Right.
Okay, but the implementation is tough, and like being able to slash these companies down, you're going to have a fight of your life on your hands. Like you need a lot of political muscle, you need a lot of public support, because these companies will attack the shit out of you.
You need a shift in power.
Tons of huge companies. Just go look at the Dow.
You need a shift in power.
Here's what I think you need. This is my question to Cyril. I know you wanted to end it, but let me throw one more in there.
Yeah, sure.
What to you is good leadership? What does that mean? Right? Because everyone has their own different interpretation of what that means and what we're
I have a
looking
number
for.
one thing that hits my mind if you want me to
Tell
share
me.
that
Go,
with you.
Go right now.
You care about the people you're in charge of.
Okay, that's fair. Let me go slightly differently on you, right? Because if we're talking about, for example, the president of the United States, it's very hard to show compassion to 300 million people. If we're talking about your local congressman, right, it's very hard to show that you actually care to 1 million people. It's very hard.
Still
What
tough,
I
right?
think we need in good leadership, because I agree with you, that is what we need. We need someone that can interpret and explain a vision of the future that everyone can understand. That to
That's
me is
also
what's
another- yeah.
really missing.
That means you're relatable and you can talk to people.
Well, you can articulate
You can
the
there you go.
idea
Sorry,
that you're
that's
looking
better.
for, right? And that's one thing that I agree with you on.
articulate.
Obama was good at. He was able to articulate what he was trying
Yeah,
to
but
do
his
in a way that made
policy
sense.
was trash. Yo.
It might have been,
Well,
but he was able to
Not
articulate.
trash, but I'm especially upset with. By the way, I just want to throw this in at the end here really quickly. I'm especially upset with what Obama did with the wars and what he didn't do with them. And I am actually in support of Donald Trump's decision to pull out of Syria. Go ahead, Jed.
Oh, that's definitely a grenade.
Was that a
That
grenade
is a
too much
huge
right
one.
at the end?
That is a
Knee-jerk.
big one.
Knee-jerk, I'm disagreeing with you, but that's beside the point.
We got kids that go hungry in this country, and we can't even spend money on them. Go ahead, Jed.
Okay, I'm not even going to address that. What
Yeah,
I was
don't.
going to
Just move on,
say.
Dad.
What I was going to say.
All right, I'll edit that out. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's,
I
mean,
will edit that out.
It's just
That's
a different
terrible.
conversation for a different day, is all. What I was going to
just
say
trying to be a
though is
leverage asshole, but go ahead.
I had a different answer for leadership, but I think I agree with Caleb after hearing what he said, especially because a lot of these people that vote today vote because they think they're voting for the best idea. So if you have a leader who can cogently express what really is the best way to move forward as a country, people will be on board because we support good ideas when we see them. We just disagree as to what those good ideas are.
Yeah. My number 2, this is now just a lob fest on leadership, which I love.
Oh, okay.
My number 2 is honesty and knowing that who is speaking to you in an honest way. I think a lot of the power that Donald Trump gets is because a lot of his most fervent supporters feel that he is being very honest and speaking to them directly. A lot with Bernie Sanders as well. Now, obviously, there can be opinions on this. That's not what I'm asking for, but I'm just saying, like, if a leader is truly honest and can speak that way, then that helps too. Like, just transparency is a good thing. So now
yeah, there's no disagreement there.
Yeah. So
there you go.
Don't be selfish.
Be better leaders. Millennials, step up.
Also, all of
Our
us.
time.
All of us.
I'm right here. Caleb Dunham for president 2024. I don't even think I can run in 2024.
I don't think you're old
I was
enough.
gonna say, I don't think
you might be.
Actually,
What do you have to be? How old do you have to be?
35.
you'd be old as shit, dog.
You would be, yeah.
35. Yeah, I would be old as shit. Oh, Jesus.
35, brother.